So Lamar Jackson has obviously been given a bag of money by the Baltimore Ravens at this point, but how good is he? And I think one thing we always talk about is, oh, well, yeah, he's an incredible runner, so let's maybe not talk so much about that in this video. Instead, we're going to talk about his passing, and really, I think he maybe is his most complete self at this point in his career, and certainly as a passer, well, yes, he won an MVP, obviously, I think that was a lot of his running ability, and then what his running ability set up. I do think he's been as good of a pocket passer now as he ever has been, at least in terms of as complete as he has been. First, let's look at his Pro Football Focus grades, and you see that last year was his second highest graded season. And for Lamar, he's someone who I like PFF grades, but he's always kind of been an exception to the PFF rule. It feels like a lot of what PFF tends to do is, I've always kind of compared it to more of a batting average than it is, a perfect stat. It's someone who, if you're a guy who just makes consistent plays, well, you're going to have a higher PFF grade than if you're the equivalent of the baseball player that doesn't hit a ton of singles but hits a ton of home runs. To me, Lamar, for the most part in his career, has been that kind of guy where he'll strike out but he'll hit those home runs. But you see last year, PFF was a big fan. An 85.2 grade is very good. It's not 90.1, but again, 2019, that was kind of a wild year. Teams in 2020 came up with new ideas of how to stop him, and I think now we've seen him kind of figure out how to counteract that. And maybe it's not fair to say he's figured out how to counteract that, more maybe the team has. But one of the big ways is you see his running grade is actually the best it's ever been. So while we're going to talk a lot about his passing, his running grade has been incredible. But I would also say that the passing has, again, been more complete. He can do more things than he could in previous years, I would say. And it's just, I think, better as a passer now. I think it's really that simple. Which, of course, given his age, makes sense. This is right around when you start to fully develop as a passer, typically, but he was just so good right out of the gate as a runner that we kind of, almost felt like he should skip the development part of a passer as well, but no, now he's there. So let's get into the film. Let's talk about this play. So it's going to be a pretty simple play where it's a one-on-one matchup on the outside that Lamar is going to look towards, and it's a route that can work. These routes definitely, with how far off the corner is going to be playing on this play, there's definitely a way you could get the first down. Worth mentioning, it's a third down. They got to get to the opponent's 41-yard line. That's where they're going here. Right when this play begins, you're going to see that right here is the receiver starting to make his cut, right? And Lamar is getting ready to be in the throwing motion. He's right about there. He's going to try to time this one very well. One of the things that Lamar just doesn't get enough credit for is being a high IQ player. Like, he is a smart football player. And watch the timing on this play. Look, as you see, he is able to push the ball down the field, and while I swear I am going to talk about him maybe being more of a complete player than he has in years past, he's really always been good at this stuff. I mean, he's always been great at timing, and that's been part of why I think that he's been so successful as a passer as well as a runner, is because obviously the running stuff helps set things up, but a lot of what the Ravens did with him was have him run, but then also have him do a lot of these timing passes because guys are getting out of position defensively due to his running ability and due to play actions and stuff like that. So because of that, timing is just so important as a quarterback, and Lamar Jackson absolutely tends to hit the timing pretty well. But really, something like this, I would say, is where I think he's thrived the most is, listen, I've been saying this for a while, that I think that very few, if any, quarterbacks could have been as successful as Lamar was in the Ravens situation offensively these past several years, just due to the unique style of play that he has and the lack of wide receivers. He really had to do a lot, but in a way, I think that's really helped him know how to throw the ball in a way where he can help out his wide receivers. And this is a great example of what I mean by that, where it's going to eventually be a one-on-one matchup as there's several receivers he could look towards. The two receivers line up towards his left, both running routes that could get open here. Lamar takes a snap, he runs to play action, and originally looks over the middle, but doesn't love what he sees there, so is instead going to look towards the one closest towards the top of the screen. And again, you could just make the throw right this second and kind of try to, push it further down. But this is what I like about Lamar in 2023 now at this point, but, when he was throwing in 2022. watch him throw it a little bit behind the receiver, giving him room to run back and get to the football. That's a really smart understanding of how to help out your receiver. I do think that rookie year Lamar, probably leads the receiver a little bit too much or tries to throw it right when the receiver is cutting instead of giving him room to come back to the football. And I think that could have been a potential error. Again, he purposely waited as long as he did to allow that to happen. Like I said, timing doesn't always work one way. Sometimes it makes sense to give your receiver an extra beat, especially when you have the time to do it, to make something like that happen. And for Lamar, he's often going to have time like that, time to let that stuff happen as well, because when you're rushing Lamar, you can't just rush him normally, because if you give up containment, you're going to probably give up, a bunch of yards through the ground. So all that works together. And there's also stuff like this where, listen, I said I'm going to talk about his passing, and I am, but you can't just talk about his passing. It doesn't make sense. You can't talk about Lamar strictly as a passer and not bring up the running, because the running is a massive part of how they play him and what the value is with Lamar. And the reality is he doesn't have to be Peyton Manning, because he adds value in so many other ways that he makes it easier on himself in the passing game. This play is a great example of that, where it's going to be a play action to the offense's right. But what's great about a Lamar Jackson play action is you can run a play action. I consider this a play action. It is probably not by definition a play action, though, because watch what's going to happen. As you see, Lamar takes a snap and he just runs to the offense's right. That's all he does. I mean, that's not really a play action. That's just, it's not really a rollout either, because it's very different in that way as well. It looks like everyone's run blocking, but the offensive line making sure they don't go past the line of scrimmage, being very smart right there. And now Lamar has a window to make a play, because they're, the Saints got out of position because they thought for sure Lamar was running there. Instead, Lamar passes, and Lamar has the ability to, when he has those windows, he takes advantage consistently. And that's another thing that he does very well, I would say, is he can take advantage of opportunities that are presented in front of him. Now, you could say, well, wait a second, what if teams stop playing that way? And what if teams are more patient and they let themselves lose in the running game, but don't let themselves lose in the passing game? Okay, then they'll lose in the running game, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of sort of simple football in a sense of, if you sell out to stop the run, teams can pass on you. If you sell out to stop the pass, teams can run on you. But with Lamar Jackson, he basically does both by himself, and that's what's so incredible. I really do believe that if Lamar Jackson had the athleticism of Kirk Cousins, he'd still be an NFL quarterback. He'd still be in the NFL, and I think there's plenty of evidence to back that up. He wouldn't be as good as he is, obviously. A big part of what makes him special is his running ability. And while I do think that teams, people will say things like, oh, well, that's great, but what happens when teams do, cover zero blitzes? What happens when you have a cover one blitz? Stuff like that. I really do believe that isn't a Lamar Jackson fault. That is a fault of the receiving core. And I think that it's kind of obvious that that's the case in at least certain areas. Like, again, that infamous Dolphins game where they played cover zero consistently and the Ravens had no answer. Yeah, Lamar Jackson had to get rid of the football 1 second every single play, and the receivers weren't getting open. They weren't making plays. They weren't forcing the Dolphins to capitalize on that. To me, that game wasn't an example of Lamar melting down. That game was sort of a showcase of what Lamar has to deal with and how much he matters. When you take him out of the game, the Ravens offense completely floundered, but now they have some receiving talent. For the first time, they might actually have a good receiving core. Last year was kind of the first year I felt like it was solid, and even it had its injuries. But this year it could be great. The Ravens could be awesome, and I'm very excited to watch it. At least that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.